Let's talk about the discard and how it looks different from the dismissive avoidant versus the fearful avoidant. Leslie Wells, connection coach here. I help individuals work on their relationships, show up better in their relationships, understand their attachment style and how it is affecting their partner and the triggers and wounds that they need to work on, as well as looking at their partner's attachment style and how they can show up better for their partner. And all of this working on your attachment style tends to really change the dynamics of your relationship and your relationship to self, meaning that you have much healthier, happier relationships. If you're not familiar with a dismissive avoidant and a fearful avoidant, go back and look at some of my other videos first because you've got a lot to learn to catch up. So the difference between the two, the pull away with the dismissive avoidant, the discard with the dismissive avoidant, usually something that starts very, very slowly. So the relationship with them, typically they show up very well in the beginning because the things that trigger them have not yet come into play. The expectations, closeness, commitment, defining the relationship, having to deal with conflict and having to deal with feedback, which feels very critical to them. Those are the things that over time, the longevity of the relationship, they tend to shut down, withdraw, and pull away. And so the discard with the dismissive avoidant is typically very, very slow. And it's not that they're doing it because they are necessarily hurt, but they are very afraid of losing their autonomy in the relationship. And they're very triggered by conflict and having to meet expectations and feeling like they may lose themselves in the relationship. So they sort of slowly back away as they notice these things happening. They also very much will breadcrumb their partner. And so where you start when they're really showing up well in the relationship and where you end, by the time they discard, a lot of times you're basically getting nothing anyway, and you can sort of ask yourself, what was I actually getting from this relationship by the time it ended? And so by breadcrumbing, I mean that they're giving you the bare minimum in the relationship. Typically, they deprioritize their partners and they're not showing up in conflict. They're not addressing situations that need to be addressed. They will brush them under the rug and move past them. They're not usually emotionally attuned, and so they're not really providing any emotional intimacy or any emotional safety, and they're not able to share openly, have transparency, express their needs, or show their emotions or hold space for your emotions and your feelings. And so by the time they discard, you're pretty much not really getting anything. It's not really a real relationship anyway, or it feels more like a roommate or situationship. And so that discard is more like they just sort of fade away. So the fearful avoidant is a lot more confusing a lot of times and a lot more shocking to a partner because the fearful avoidant holds a betrayal wound. They grew up in a situation with their caregivers where they learned that their caregivers could not show up for them in a way that felt good. They learned that love and relationships are unsafe, people are not trustworthy, and so they're always looking for a betrayal. And so they are typically always sort of moving the goalpost and testing their partners to see if they're trustworthy and they're going to be able to show up well for them. And so they, because of that fear of betrayal and feeling like you're not safe and you're not trustworthy and relationships aren't, they will lean into a relationship because they really crave closeness, intimacy, connection, and commitment, but then they're also afraid of being hurt. So they'll lean in and then they will get overwhelmed and afraid and they will pull back. And so for them, there's a lot of push-pull. So it can be very confusing for a partner when they actually have pulled away for good or discarded for good. Because a lot of times one of their protest behaviors, when they feel unheard or unseen, these are two of their biggest needs when they want to be seen, heard, and understood and really valued and really treated like they're special. They want someone to really get to know them. That's part of the way that they build safety, to feel like they're not going to be betrayed. And so if they feel like they have chronically not been heard, seen, and valued, or they feel that there has been a betrayal, they will use sometimes very strong protest behaviors, and one of those could be threatening to leave. And so they will threaten to leave, but in reality, it's a protest behavior, meaning that they don't really want to leave. They just want they want to kind of kick you in the pants to get you to come up and lean in and chase them and tell them everything's okay, reassure them, and show up better for them. It's sort of like a last-ditch, desperate attempt to get their partner to show up better and actually engage in the relationship the way that they need to be able to feel seen, heard, and understood and cared for. And so it's very confusing because they will threaten to leave sometimes on whether or not they're being serious. So sometimes that discard at first to their partner can be like, oh, this is just another one of those protest times where they're shutting down, they're pulling back, and they're threatening to leave as a protest behavior. When they feel betrayed, they can go from, they can do a really hard pull away and shut down, because it's almost like they've gotten to the point where they've leaned in, they've expressed themselves, they've sort of gone into a fight response, they've done all these protest behaviors to get what they need, and then they sort of get to this place of hopelessness and desperation where they're like, I'm never going to get it, there's nothing else I can do, and their body and brain shuts down and goes into a trauma response where they become avoidant. And it's at that point when they get to that place of hopelessness and helplessness where if it's bad enough, that's where they will often do their discard. So this can be confusing because they really take any kind of betrayal or anything that upsets them as a big betrayal. They have much deeper feelings about things and they draw much deeper meaning. And so they can go from being fine 1 minute and then the next minute very quickly they can feel betrayed or have this lack of trust and lack of safety come up. And so it can really be a quick shift from everything that feels good in the relationship to all of a sudden they're shut down and they're done. And it's a lot more unexpected and unpredictable than it is with the dismissive avoidant. Sometimes if they start to suspect or feel like you're going to hurt them, break their trust, or betray them, they will go ahead and subconsciously hurt you, destroy you before you do it to them. And that's another way that it can sort of come out of the blue. They also have a high level of reactivity because of they're constantly triggered with that lack of safety and that betrayal wound. And so unlike the dismissive avoidant who may sort of just walk out quietly and be like, look, I know I can't give you what I need, or this isn't really working out, relationships aren't for me, I think we should just end this. It can be really a big blow up with the fearful avoidant, the way that they leave and the way that they end the relationship. They can more or less just slam the door in your face after a full-on fight response. So they can go from everything being fine and then just swinging the door in your face, leaving you very confused. They also have a really bad habit of choosing very bad partners. As a fearful avoidant, the brain is always seeking what is familiar. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where a lot of times they will seek somebody that is similar to their caregivers that cannot be trusted and cannot show up for them well. And so they end up a lot of times in abusive relationships with a narcissist, somebody who has an addiction problem, somebody who has betrayed them in the way of, cheating or finances or mentally or verbally abuse them. They find bad partners. And so they can kind of get to this place where they're so fed up and so angry and they have so much of this anger built up and the fact that people are not safe for them that they can, something small can be enough to end it for them because they're just done. They're done being used, they're being misused, being mistreated. And so it can be like one thing that you feel is small, but for them it's like the straw that broke the camel's back and they're just done. They can get to this place where they have like zero tolerance for being mistreated because they have experienced it so much in the past and had so many partners in the past that they're just done. So they can discard you over seemingly small things. And so that's really the difference between how the dismissive avoidant will discard and how the fearful avoidant will discard. If you have ever been on the receiving end of either one of these discards, I would love to hear you share your experience and see if you can see any way that you resonate with this.